But yeah, no, it's really just yeah. So you're gonna have to help me out here. It's basically 8 o'clock right now.
Oh no.
Totally.
We're just in a good flow. We just do introductions. We'll just be like welcome back. And then we typically talk about our last 7 days. Then we go into our question. And then we close out with typically like a quote or something. Do you have the quote this time though, Julie?
Yeah, I got the
Yeah.
quote. I got the quote. I got the quote.
You have a quote, great.
All right,
Yeah.
but yeah, I do want to ask before we start, just because this has been on my mind since the last time we talked. You said you did hypnosis. Was that?
Yeah, that was part of what I learned in graduate school. I didn't like focus on being a hypnotherapist. I kind of used some of the techniques of like guided visualization and that kind of thing within the therapy that I did. But the whole hypnosis that I learned is not like, and I don't know if anybody does this anymore, where you're like the person is in such a trance that they don't remember when they came out. It's not like that. It's the hypnosis that I learned is more, it's really more like guided meditation and visualization into the past or into the trauma or into whatever it is you want to heal. So yeah, it's
that seems a lot less scary than forgetting that you were ever in a room to begin with.
Right. No, and I don't know that that's so much of what people do, anymore. At least in the graduate programs that I was in, I did a 9-month training in hypnosis, and none of it was that. It was all very deep work, very, sort of helping a person access what's stuck in their unconscious.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, really cool.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that forever. I'm like, wait a minute. But all right, I guess we should begin.
Sure.
I've started to figure out a good intro. So all I say is welcome back, everyone.
Okay.
I am Julian Johnson. My name today is Big Brother. For the listeners who don't watch the video, I have Tyler, the unperceived.
Yes, always unperceived. Do not want to be perceived.
That's a title I've never heard before.
Yeah.
Yes. And we are not alone today because we're here right now with out from what I'm going to say is a psychic guide. She wrote what? My bad. I didn't do like all the background, but I wanted to say you wrote, what's it called? What was your other book? Sorry about this.
That's okay.
Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire. We have Phyllis Leavitt. Phyllis Leavitt with us today. How are you, Phyllis? How was your last?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. How was your last 7-ish days going?
Good. Really good. Intense as always life is between family and I'm working on my present book, America in Therapy, and it's all written, but I'm working on the marketing end of that, and being all over social media, which is a really big new realm for me that I never did before I wrote this book, and so I'm on a learning curve, and like all of us, right?
I understand. Oh no, that social media. I'm 25 right now, and I've never been on social media, so this is I'm learning alongside you.
Right, and it's intense, right?
It can be. I'm on social media, and I had to take a break like a couple months ago, and I was just like, it was nice. It is nice.
And it's a great tool for wonderful communication as long as it's not misused to hurt people.
Yeah.
Very, very true. What about you, Tyler? How's your last 7-ish days?
My last 7 days. Oh boy, what I was about to say. I like always blank every time you ask me that. I feel like my days all start blending together because I kind of work from home now, which is newer for me since I started a new job back in December. But it's been calm for the most part, which is good.
Okay.
So I feel like it's been pretty calm considering everything that happened like earlier this year. I'm just like, the only thing that's annoying right now is I was supposed to have my new debit card because I had to dispute a charge, and they said that they would express send it to me. So I was supposed to have it like today or tomorrow, but they just sent it yesterday and it's not express. So I won't have a card for like almost 2 weeks maybe. That was like the craziest thing that's happened to me recently. But other than that, thankfully I haven't had anything like too crazy. So it's a rent.
Look, you don't need money. That's do away with it.
I wish, like in the back of my mind, I don't need money, but you know, in real time I do. So unfortunately.
And then my last 7-ish days, it's been calm and then hectic all at the same time because what happened? So someone was in my car over the weekend. Yeah. I kind of forgot
like broke in your car.
See, not broke. They didn't break in because I forgot to lock my car door, but they were definitely in my car, just looking about for whatever. So,
oh my goodness!
And this was in my apartment complex too.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so they didn't because I living in Atlanta. The first thing I was told, I'm like, don't leave anything valuable in your car because they will break your window. So I'm like, good to know. So I didn't have anything valuable. The only thing that I've noticed that's gone is some gum and like a ring, like a I love you ring that came with the car. Like I think it said I heart you. Like I really don't even know what it is. But other than that, I was in for my job. I was in the forest. And and I was having a time of my life. Like I was in the stream, up the stream, bear crawling on the side of a mountain, having a great time.
Wow, nice.
That's nice.
Yes, so that's been my 7-ish days. I'm pretty sure there's something else that I'm missing.
That's what I'm saying. My mind just blanks, but you know, it's okay. We did the highlights. That's what matters.
This is true. This is true. So I guess it's time to ask us the question. The question. Phyllis, do you remember the question?
Not at all.
No, that's okay.
No, that's perfectly fine. Tyler, do you remember the question?
I do. I remember it because I've thought it up, but I'm probably going to say it like differently this time. But have you ever been in family therapy, and if not, would you consider it?
Oh, are you asking me that?
Well, it's for everybody, but we would definitely want you to answer first because you're our guest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. I have done that when my children were little. I did some family therapy with my first husband, and and I think in my case, I think family therapy is extremely valuable because I think if we don't really understand the dynamics of our family and the values of our family and the conditioning kind of influences of our family members, it's hard to really understand ourselves fully because we're all conditioned by the family units and family dynamics that we live in, and especially with the people that we depend on. So I didn't do family therapy, obviously, as a child because my parents didn't probably even know about therapy, and probably wouldn't have gone. But I think what it helped me see for myself was it helped me really understand that I had to do some of my own healing work, and that I probably at that point, became really clear that I was not able to heal the marriage that I was in at that time. And it helped me find the strength to leave. And that's not true for everybody. I mean, I think family therapy can be completely healing for a family and parents can stay together and improve their relationships with each other and with their children and with, with the world that they interact with. But not all relationships are resolvable, and not all people are at a place in their own healing to resolve the relationships they're in. So for me, it was more of an impetus to do my own work and create my life, from a better foundation.
Okay.
How about you guys?
Well, I'm gonna let Julian do it first because
you mentioned something that went back to what else happened in my past weekend of all relationships can't be healed.
Mm-hmm.
I might get into that later, but it's not family related. It's friend related. But no, I have never did family therapy. But I do think it would be beneficial for my family. Just because, not trying to put my family's business out there, but there's been some things that I would definitely think it would be beneficial if we all went separately and together, because I actually mentioned this the last episode about how I can't be the glue that holds everything together. That's kind of my role that I took upon myself for the family. But I'm I'm not certified to do that. But even me doing my best might not be good enough for what the family needs, especially if I'm X hours away.
Yeah. It's funny that you were talking about being X hours away, because I feel like that's how I'm feeling too, because my family's in a whole nother state from me. So if I were, first off, my family has done family therapy, but I was not a part of it. I think I would have wanted to be, but it would have to been structured differently than what they were doing, because it was for a specific concern that really didn't involve me. But I think since, I feel like before I started getting into therapy, I probably would have been I don't know what I would have done at family therapy. I think sometimes you don't have the tools to really know what you're talking about or what you want to really dig into or what that's even going to look like. And then sometimes I think it also gives you more tools on how to, if something comes up, how are you going to resolve it outside of and within therapy. I think having your own personal therapy helps open you up to that experience more.
Right.
Because before that, I probably would have been on the side of I don't know if I need family therapy. I don't know what that would look like. But since being in therapy recently, I think I would appreciate it. But I don't want to make people ultimatums, because I feel like maybe you can start with family therapy and then it leads you to individual therapy. But I feel like individual therapy helps family therapy, so you kind of almost it would make more sense to do it side by side. And I think sometimes taking on the responsibility of that for each person in your family is another step or maybe another hurdle that would make family therapy a little harder.
True. And Phyllis, if you have a question at any time, just feel free to ask.
I was just going to jump in and just offer one quick thing to what you were saying, and that is that, often, and there is this interplay between one person's individual mental health and well-being and the whole family system and the dynamics in the family, that they just are interrelated, and you can't really take them apart, even though you sort of have to look at them, right? Yeah. But often what I found as a therapist is that one person kind of brings the family to therapy. It's usually one person in enough pain or distressed enough or depressed enough or addicted enough or anxious enough that sort of is the beacon that says we need help. And that can bring the family to therapy. And then it's possible to look at how the family can either is harming or can help. And so I know in the beginning of my practice, I worked with a lot of children, and inevitably they were the one that brought the family to therapy, because most children were really suffering from problems in their family, and they're the identified patient, but they're not really the problem. They're the symptom bearer.
Mm.
And that, go ahead, yeah.
Oh, no, continue.
I was just going to say again, like, you have to interrupt me though. But that's the same thing in our country and in our society. The most symptomatic people are calling for help from our larger communities, our schools, our places of business, our houses of worship, our states, and our federal government. They're calling for help for what's not working in some aspect of the family of America. And I think that's a new lens on looking at our most symptomatic citizens.
You're absolutely. You're kind of breaking up. I'm my bad. There were two thoughts in my head. Because Tyler, you were saying that you weren't part of the family therapy. So were you like the youngest? Or you just born?
Yeah, well, it was with on my dad's side, it was more like a siblings thing for them.
Okay.
It wasn't for me per se. And then there was talk of bringing me into it, but then I was like, I don't really want to be brought into something that I don't feel like I just felt like the dynamic was gonna get weird and I was gonna get kind of pulled into whatever somebody else was trying to defend or whatever else. And I was like, this doesn't seem like a safe place for me to voice what I probably need to. And I'm like, if we had a re-scratch of it, I think I would do it then. Just kind of like fresh on the board, and like I can bring up topics and everybody else can bring up their topics, and then we can just kind of like go from there and let a therapist guide us. But I was nowhere in the process, and I think they had been like a couple of sessions in by the time I had heard about it. And so I was like, and then people were calling me and like, oh yeah, I think like I don't like some people didn't even think like the therapy was worth it, but they wanted to bring me in to like prove a point. And I was just like, I won't be brought in to prove a point. So
It sounds like it's probably best that you weren't in that situation.
Yeah. So it was just like I would rather have been brought in the beginning of the process because you thought like this would be a helpful thing for our whole family instead of being in as like a byproduct of an argument, basically. So
got you. The reason why I asked that is because with my family situation, with my youngest brother, at least how I see the situation, is that we kind of not shelter him from but we just try to what's the word I'm looking for? We're trying to like, I guess, hide it in a sense. So because he wasn't involved in the situation, or to my knowledge has any memory of past events that happened. So we try not to bring it up, or at least I try not to bring it up with him. So that's the reason why I asked.
I definitely feel like that's kind of like a tough place to be because I've seen, or I've at least heard from like personal experiences, times when people wanted to be brought into the conversation because like something might have been hidden from them, but they can still feel it. And it's like, I know something's happening and I'd rather people would have addressed it instead of like keeping it from me. Whereas like I had fully known about the situation that they were referring to, and I had already been asked to be like removed from that. And that's why I kind of had that boundary up because I was like, I know exactly what's happening. I don't want to be a part of this conversation. I don't think I would add to this. And also I have like no context. So and then it was just like wasn't speaking to things that I probably would have even spoke to anyway. So
got you.
Yeah. Oh wait, but you had a second thing, right?
Oh yeah. I definitely had a second question. I was actually about to get into it. It's just with family therapy, it's kind of what have you done to keep the peace or to keep things stable, I guess, is if that makes sense.
For me personally, I feel like I don't try to do that as much because I also have one of those tendencies where people would come to me to kind of like keep the peace or like mediate something. And since I have been like, because I was in counseling before in undergrad, and then I got an actual therapist after graduate school. Because I was just like, after you go into graduate school, like your brain is just scrambled. Then I had my job, and my new job was stressing me out, and all these new changes in life were stressing me out. And I was like, okay, I need a therapist. So that's like, so since I've been kind of like in and out of that process, I've kind of identified, at least for myself, like, I don't like, if I can help a situation, I would like to, but it does, if it doesn't have anything to do with me, but someone's bringing me in to like prove a point, I'm not going to be involved in that, because I just don't feel like I want to be used to prove a point anymore. I feel like if you want me to talk with you about the situation because you feel like it's open dialogue, a dialogue, and we can all talk about it, then that feels like more appropriate. Because even, it's funny, our friend Keon was on our last episode, and he's the main person who has really kind of opened my eyes to this, because at first he used to say this, he used to irritate the mess out of me, but he was like, if you bring up an issue, you have to be able to communicate through it if someone brings back an issue for you as well. Like, maybe this is feeding into something else that that the other person is feeling from you, and it has to be an open dialogue, or there's just no, like, there's no point, or there's not going to be true resolution out of it. So
Phyllis?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all really good points. Like, we all want to be heard, but it's harder to hear other people. So, you know, one of the most important things is, if I want to be heard, I have to be willing to hear you. And I think that's when there's conflict or there's upset, I think that's one of the hardest things for people to do, because we just become insistent that we're right and the other person is wrong. And we think if we batter them with that, they'll get it, which is, like, you know, doesn't work. And none of us want that to be the way someone talks to us. But it is just sort of the unconscious go-to. So, and I think one of the things that's so helpful about a therapy process, if people really can't work it out themselves, is that a therapist is somebody who helps people listen and sort of sets ground rules for, like, you know, how do you listen and how do you respond in a way that a person is interested and open to what you have to say, as well as you learning how to be open to what they have to say. And there's just, you know, there's certain skills we teach people, like, you know, like holding back on just sort of learning to restrain yourself from saying things that are unkind, or raising your voice, or making disgusted faces, or, you know, stomping out, which people do. You know, we get reactive and we do these things. And I think the key really is one of the things that why when you brought up several times that you didn't want to be brought in to prove somebody's point. And I think that that's a really important point, because the whole value of good therapy, when it's like family therapy or couples therapy or any kind of therapy that involves more than one person, is that the point isn't to prove one person wrong. The point is to help people understand each other and be accountable for their own behavior. And, you know, because usually we have something to be accountable for ourselves, whatever it is. Listen deeply, and then really try to reach some kind of resolution and come back together. I mean, the point is that we end up, you know, in a space of care and love and cooperation and nonviolence. And if we can't do that, which sometimes people can't, then to learn how to separate peacefully. These are all things that I'm hoping that will happen in our larger context of our country.
I wonder, when you bring up the larger context of the country, do you think it's the role of therapists to do that, or like whose role would that be?
I think it's many people's role, but I think it could be the role of the therapeutic community, people who are experts in the field of psychology and human relations and healing trauma, and mediation, all of those skills, to have a place at the table of our country. You know, and we'd have to vote for that. We'd have to ask for that. We'd have to say, this is what we want as part of our government, that we want trained facilitators in Congress who would actually set the ground rules for different, differing parties to actually listen to each other and try to reach compromises for the good of the American family. Because, when you look at America through the lens of family systems, we know that if parents are at each other's throats, their children suffer as well as themselves. And their children really suffer. And so I believe that the American population is suffering from all the divisiveness and threats of violence and, horrible rhetoric that we see in the news every day. I think we're all suffering from that. And I think some people feel helpless, some people feel angry, some people feel disgusted, some people feel like they just want to stick their head in the sand, or they just are then filled with hatred themselves, and none of those things work. So I to answer your question, just to go back to the first question, yeah, I would love to see the therapeutic community and the field of psychology. I'd love to see there be a department of psychology, in our government that is really committed to government national health and the mental health and the mental health of our citizenship. Because that's really the best way to avoid and curb violence and recover from violence.
Well, I think you bring up a pretty good point, because I do think mental health is one of those things that really has been a gap in not even like nationwide also, but just even on a interpersonal level, there's just such a big gap. I think the gap really became more prevalent just kind of like with how people feel about therapy, because a lot of people even now think therapy is like
for crazy people,
a sign of like being weak. Yeah, or like
absolutely.
Like, why would I need therapy? Nothing's like wrong with me. And it's like the fact that you feel like something has to be seriously wrong for you to get therapy is like a crazy notion to me, especially now, because I also feel that maybe COVID also kind of, because it was such a big grieving process in itself that like we didn't get to process just on a national level, is just kind of the truth. And then we were just kind of like, we had to go back to work after everybody was so stressed out and didn't know where their next like money was coming from. Now it's like, oh, let's all just go back to work and then like act like it didn't happen.
Oh yeah.
This is just like another sign of it, how like we're just like, okay, well, I mean, the grieving process of anything in life, I feel like, is so ignored.
Right.
It's really, really ignored. Like, if you even think about how if you go to a company and you get bereavement, you really only get bereavement to go to the funeral. You don't get bereavement time to actually grieve the person that you lost, which is insane and should actually be a part of it.
Yeah, no, and then with it being COVID, no, you're absolutely right, because grieving doesn't really play a factor, and it's like people think that grieving can just be done in a day, or that it's not reoccurring, because one day you can be fine, one day it's you're right back where you were. And then going back to just the therapy, and no, I actually forgot the question. You
Oh no.
but you were mentioning something. Well, I guess I'll go off of this, going back to just what the question I asked, which was what you do to keep the peace. I think that also plays a part into it, because let's just say your family's having a bad day and everything. You can say, oh, let's go get some ice cream or something, or have family night, or do something of just to help, because no one lives the life that you live, but you can easily do even the little things that probably means a huge difference to someone else.
Yeah. I know this is gonna sound kind of like, I don't know. I feel silly saying it, but sometimes I feel like enough people don't get hugs. Like, I truly believe that. Like, sometimes if you see someone having like a really hard time or a really hard day, I really feel like a lot of times you just want to be hugged and like acknowledge that you're having a hard day.
Right.
And like that in itself can be enough to just be like, okay, someone like sees me. So, and I don't know. A lot of people, I think maybe that also starts at the family level too sometimes, like because I just know some people who haven't had a lot of like physical contact and like physical touch and things like that when they were younger, and it's kind of like now they're kind of like weirded out by it and all this other stuff. But and then I know some people who like they hug way more than I do, and I thought I was comfortable with physical touch. I'm like, okay, we don't have to hug this long.
We have to back up.
Yeah, but I appreciate that if I know I see this person, they're legitimately gonna just express anything to me and give me a hug, and like I know they're the person that I can go to for that kind of comfort, and that in itself can be really comforting too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think people want to be what's the word you used? Noticed. But I used something that was I heard over not too long ago. 3 H's. Do you want to be helped, heard, hugged? Because not everyone wants that physical touch, but they might just want to just let it out. Because I know I'm the type of person to where a hug's nice, but more than likely to help me, hear what I have to say. Because
I think that's really good. I think both are really good. I mean, I think we do need physical touch and we need to feel connected. But one of the things that's the most satisfying in a human relationship is to feel heard, and seen the way you said that. And I think that's what good mental health provides. When people aren't mentally healthy, they don't hear, they don't see other people. They're wrapped up in themselves and their point of view, and that's all there is. And it's very hurtful. And if you have children and you're like that, it's extremely hurtful.
And that sparked what I was trying to say earlier about having friends. So with my having a situation with friends that's been kind of going on and off, and over the weekend, in my past 7 days, I told them like, hey, I'm not okay. I told them this, and but because of how the situation unfolded, I told them that I don't feel comfortable bringing it to you, because when I brought my feelings to you, I was yelled back at or ignored or something of that nature. So I'm like, when you're ready to have this conversation, come to me, because I can't do anything else. And I know, like you said, everyone needs to be, even though you're hurt, you have to be understanding that they might have been hurt too. So, and I'm willing to have that conversation, but I think there's been a very large miscommunication that I don't know how else to figure out what else to do.
But, yeah, and sometimes you need a third party to kind of navigate it so that people aren't just in a reactive state, that it helps people calm down and listen. And I know that's a lot of what couples therapy is about, is like really helping people feel safe enough to not only to express their feelings and try to get their needs met if possible, but also to feel safe enough to hear things that might be uncomfortable to hear. Because that's a part of human relationships too. Like, nobody wants to be a victim, but it's easier to be a victim than a perpetrator. It really is. Right? Yeah. Or to acknowledge that. And perpetrator, by that I just mean, like, we all hurt somebody at some point, maybe not even intentionally. But none of us are perfect. And sometimes we say and do things that hurt other people, and that we may know that we're doing that, or we may not know that we're doing that. And we have to be strong enough inside to be able to tolerate hearing things about ourselves that are not so comfortable. And I think that's really hard for people. I really do. I think it takes a lot of strength. So when people say, and like you were referring to, Tyler, earlier, that a lot of people think therapy is a sign of weakness, It's not at all. It's like delving into my own pain or into a sticky relationship takes courage. It takes
Yeah.
strength. And it certainly takes strength of character to admit if I'm at fault in something. And yet that's what we want other people to do, right? We all want somebody else to say, I was wrong, I'm sorry. But what about us? You know?
That's true. Self-reflection.
Yeah, totally. Big time.
Yeah, we're just giggling because it came up in our last podcast as
Oh,
well.
really?
Yeah. We were talking about just trust and trusting in others, trusting yourself, trusting in strangers, and how much you do so. And we had ended up on a tangent, and our friend was talking about how self-reflection is like really, really important because the main person who has to be honest with themselves, like you have to be honest with yourself first, and
Right.
more so than anybody else in your life, because if you
Right.
can't self-reflect, then you're not gonna really be able to see the change that you want to see or be able to trust people like you'd like to in your day to day.
And one of the things I see is that to the extent that one person can just be really self reflective and take responsibility for themselves, it kind of opens the door for other people to do that too. It makes it feel safe to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes you feel like you're self-reflecting enough and then you find something else in yourself that you're just like, oh, I haven't reflected on that one yet.
Right.
Self-reflection is a journey.
A journey.
Oh yeah, no, and that this kind of brings me up to a question on which I think you guys kind of answered is, do you think everyone needs therapy? Because to me personally, from me, I will definitely preface that I have not been in therapy or anything, but just hearing about it, it's more so to not give you the answer, but it's for you to find it, like discover it yourself. So if you're able to ask those deep questions to yourself first, do
Hmm.
you really? I don't think you need. I'll change my thought. I don't think you need as much therapy as someone else. But I think if you're able to ask the why, the who, the what, the when, the why, and really dig deep into yourself, um, therapy. Yeah, I will say therapy is not as, what's the word I'm looking for? Not as I don't want to
Maybe
say,
maybe not as essential or critical. Or,
yes,
yeah.
that's exactly what I'm going for. But your guys' thoughts?
Well, I'm gonna say that personally, every time I've heard a person say that, they have probably needed therapy. I'm gonna be really honest with you.
That's fine.
Every time a person has said that, they have really needed some therapy. Not in a bad way, but like there. I don't know how to describe it, but maybe Phyllis can speak to this more because I'm just saying my opinion on it. But because I've been in therapy, and typically I feel like people who kind of have the same issues as me, I can see that they'd be like, oh, well, I'm normally the person who handles all the issues, and I'm normally the person that can smooth over and have resolution with other people, that maybe I don't need therapy, and or maybe I don't need therapy the same way people are saying it. And I feel like you learn a lot more when you're in a space where all you do is focus on yourself and another person is dedicated to
Hmm.
also focusing on you. And
Yeah.
so they dig in stuff that you probably wouldn't have even thought to ask yourself. And I think it's kind of more of an eye opener than I think some people give it credit to, because sometimes I think there are innate things that people do that they feel like, oh, that's just how I do things, but like they haven't really processed why exactly they do that. Because
Mm,
that's like your norm, and then other people around you, they feel like that's your norm, and it's not harming anybody per se, but maybe you may need to reflect on that and be like, hey, like, why do I do this thing, even if it doesn't harm people actively or is not harming myself or things of that nature. There's stuff that I do that I feel like my therapist has kind of made me think about more, that I'm honestly is normal and people have probably liked it about me, but then I had to be like, oh, okay, wait a minute, that's probably not something that I might want to keep doing, especially as a person who has like people pleasing tendencies. People love people pleasers, okay? I'm not gonna lie to you, they love them because they please people. That's what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And like when you're the person who's like likable and doing all the stuff that other people enjoy, it's kind of like, well, I mean, what else would I need to talk about? I have no issues personally. Everybody comes to me with their issues, and I feel like I have nothing going on. When really there's probably another extra layer of something that you could focus on within yourself that might even strengthen those relationships. Like I've recently just been trying to learn to be more vulnerable in relationships and also be more accepting of different parts of myself that I used to be like very ashamed of. Because I opened up to my therapist and I was telling her one time, I was just like, I feel like I'm boring. Like I literally told her, I was like, I think I'm just so boring. Like all my other friends have like stuff going on and like things that they want to ask advice on. And I don't have as much stuff as them. And I'm like, what is that about? And she was just like, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being like feeling like you're the boring friend, because people, if that's kind of like how they see you in your life, it might just be comforting just to be like, hey, this person's doing something regular today. And I called them just to have a regular conversation, and that's all they needed. So
And maybe that's why people turn to you, because you sort of have a calm steadiness that is comforting and helpful.
yeah, and
So
she
it's
really helped me
not
like see,
necessarily boring.
yeah. And it's like sometimes it's kind of like boring because you see like TV shows and the main characters always have something going on and they're like the outgoing people who are always doing stuff, and it's never the person who's like sitting at home having a book and I just went to the grocery store.
I will say you kind of hit two things for me. With the people pleasing, it's like, oh, you always come to me for whatever issue. You're technically getting their baggage as well, whether you realize it or not. That like that is negativity that you're also receiving. It might not, you might not receive it as like, oh, this is negative, but it is negativity. So that could also play into a factor into why you might need therapy. But also with the being boring, I will say it's never the best to like compare yourself to others. No, I'm not taking a shot at you, Tyler. I'm want to make that really clear right now. These are just the thoughts on my mind. That comparing yourself to how other people live or into TV, it's not the best way, because with TV it's scripted. They get 7, 8 writers to write the perfect life, and we never get to see the boring. Oh, I'm eating cereal, or I stubbed my toe or whatever. Those are cutscenes, and we just jump to the next part in the show because they're purposely made to be entertaining for however long they are.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But I mean, I've accepted it now as like this is just how I am. Like I'm just hanging out.
This is me.
And I'm perfectly fine with it now. So it's just kind of like beforehand I was having a thing about it, but it's kind of like, meh. And then now I feel like because I have better boundaries with how I like try to talk with people about their stuff. Like, I'm not gonna jump into an argument with you and defend you to this other person. Like, I'm not gonna do that. And like, I've also been more, if I hear something or somebody like gives me advice or wants advice from me, like I typically like, okay, this is not anything that has to do with me, and I'm just like supporting a friend and just listening to them, and that's kind of like what I do now. But I feel like, yeah, it definitely for me was a thing that I had to go to therapy for. But it's just one of those things that like I hadn't seen beforehand, because also I was just kind of like that person when I was younger, and also kind of like in my family I took that roll on, and nobody really told me to not take it on. So it's one of those things where I wouldn't have caught it. Like I just wouldn't have caught it. Everybody thought that was like regular me. And then actually my other friends started going to therapy and they were like, I feel like I'm trauma dumping on you, so I don't want to tell you this stuff anymore. And I was like, what? And then I was just like, oh, because they went to therapy, they're telling me something and I don't know how to receive it. So that actually wasn't the thing that led me to therapy, but it was just one of the things in my mind, like, oh, okay, like they were already kind of seeing how our interactions could have been unpositive. And like maybe they were feeding into something that even they themselves didn't realize till they went to therapy. And then when they went there and they had that reflection, it helped me even further when I finally went to therapy to get that reflection myself. And so I think sometimes just even talking to somebody who's been therapized helps you kind of like maybe trigger something within your mind, or maybe even something that you wouldn't have even thought was a scenario in your relationship that you needed to maybe process can be brought up.
Mm-hmm. You know, a couple things come to mind when both of you are talking. And one of them is we could probably all use an upgrade in the way we relate to ourselves and to other people. So it doesn't have to be a crisis that brings people to therapy. And some couples do. They're kind of like, we have a good relationship, but we'd really like to communicate better. But for the most part, people come to therapy when they're in pain and when something's really not working. And that's okay. You know, we don't go to a doctor if we're feeling well. You know, we might want to improve our diet or get more exercise or, you know, drink cleaner water or breathe fresher air or, you know, do something else to improve our health. But we don't necessarily go to the doctor unless we're really feeling sick or injured. And what I would say is that, so I think anybody could benefit from upgrading their relationship to themselves and other people, even if they're not in a crisis. But what I would also add for like, because everybody's not going to go to therapy and everybody doesn't have access to that kind of help in our country and certainly in the world. And what I would love to see, besides that it's funded, you know, that all healthcare covers therapy, because I do think it should be available to anyone who wants it. But I would love to see psychology be taught in our schools as a regular course, not as an elective, but teach our kids about family therapy, teach our kids about healthy communication, what makes healthy communication, teach our kids about what abuse and neglect look like, and make it safe for them to report that if there's something going on with them or in their family or that they see in their community. Teach people about group dynamics and the influence of, you know, what makes somebody a bully, what makes a kid withdraw, what contributes to somebody being an addict, rather than criticizing them or putting them down because they're not functioning well. Teach people about what creates that kind of symptom in the first place, you know, because, you know, as a therapist, you see that all the time. A child comes to therapy and they're being hugely aggressive to their siblings, or they're failing in school and they're a smart kid. You know, we look for like, what's bothering them? What's causing them anxiety or pain or fear, to really get to the root of what's causing the problem. And so, you know, I think the more people that are informed about psychology up front, the better access they have to being healthier themselves in relationship and getting help if they need it. So I think it's a multi kind of pronged approach.
But no, you actually, you saying psychology shouldn't be just an elective, I definitely agree with you with that, because actually as in high school, I wanted to learn 3 sciences, physics, just so, and they all had to do with me. It was physics, just so I know how my body can work and connects and everything. Psychology, because I wanted to know how my mind worked and how to get the most out of it. And then I can't remember the last one, but I just know it wasn't chemistry. But we are
right.
But no, I definitely agree that it should be universal. Like it should be there that way.
Right.
Like how you said before, that we aren't just treating us treating the symptom,
Right. You're
but
treating the
actually
cause.
treating the
Right.
cause.
Right. And I think the more people, there's so many people out there in the world today, and we can just talk about America, but I think it's all over the world, who have no idea why they rage. They have no idea why they're on drugs. They have no idea why they isolate and, are agoraphobic or, suffer from anxiety or they're obsessive. People just, unless they have some understanding of what causes these kinds of things on a psychological, family dynamics, interpersonal level, we just think we're flawed human beings. And that's a tragedy. Nobody's born a flawed human being. We're all born pure, innocent little beings who then get kind of written on. And, some of that writing has to be erased.
Yeah, that's very true. I've actually been getting to like inner child work lately. So
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like when you do stuff that is more tied to what you used to do when you were like a kid, it kind of brings you back into that and it gives you a different kind of like joy. So it's kind of
Right.
nice because they kind of take it from you when you become an adult. You like, everything starts costing money. You're like, oh boy, how am I gonna do this? But like, I don't know, inner child stuff is just like getting ice cream and like getting a coloring book. I'll be honest with you, I have like 3 coloring books. I love it though. And I'm not ashamed of it. Like an adult coloring book is there for a reason, and I'm one of the buyers. So
Mm-hmm.
and
Beautiful.
like also another thing that you were talking about that actually made me think about it. The reason I did actually start getting counseling was because I was going through like a dark time in undergrad because my dad was going through something and it really upset me and basically kind of put me
Mm.
I don't like saying depressive episode, but like I was in bed, I wasn't getting up. I really didn't see anybody for a while. And afterward, I was like, I have to go to a counselor. And the only reason I even started in undergrad is because it was free then. Like you can go to counselors at your
Mm.
school while you're there.
Ah,
And the counselor is like, it because it was free, it was a resource that I knew was like easily accessible to me because I could just walk there. Like that's what really kind of started this journey for myself. And so
Right.
yeah, I do think a lot of times it probably is just because something deep happens and you're just like, I don't know how to deal with this. And then afterward it kind of opens you up to all kinds of other conversations. So it's kind of cool.
mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that kind of ties back into it shouldn't just be just an elective for me. Like, I, a lot of people would benefit if they just knew that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's available on the campus, but I don't think that's always the case.
Well, some campuses there it's available, but it takes so long to get a counselor because they don't have enough funding, there's not enough counselors, things of that nature. So you even have barriers when you're on college campuses. I was just kind of lucky that the college campus that we went to, um, they actually had the resources and a person there. And she wasn't necessarily a therapist who I was talking to. She was more so a counselor, because she was a graduate student. But I even think
Mm.
that itself kind of helped me kind of be like, okay, well, maybe I wouldn't mind a therapist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like even having that level, I was just like, I wonder what the next level of like actually having a therapist would look like for me.
Okay. Uh, we'll say I am planning on going to therapy. I will mention that before this conversation even happened.
Right?
I will say I am planning on going to therapy. I have to find one, but what is
Doesn't
what
have to battle right there though.
yeah. What do you think is a good reason to not get out of therapy, but more so switch therapists? Because not every person is the right fit. Like, what
Mm.
is a good sign for it's like, all right, this isn't.
Well, I think in terms of the second one, when it's a time to switch therapists, I think pretty much in our lives, we know who we jive with and who we don't. You know when you feel comfortable with someone, if you feel like being more vulnerable with them or sharing more deeply, and you know when you don't. And I think we should just trust that. I don't think a person should second guess himself. If you go to a therapist and you don't feel totally comfortable and you don't feel seen or you really don't feel helped in any way, then you don't have to stay. There's no right or wrong. You get to, if you're going to ask for help, you should find the person that feels the most helpful to you. And sometimes it's that they have an amazing technique that they do with you, like hypnotherapy or EMDR or inner child work or family work or whatever. And sometimes it's just like the person you needed to talk to because they get you and they're empathetic and they're there with you. But I think we should trust ourselves and with that. And in terms of when is the time to leave therapy, I think it's when, and there's no one size fits all for anything, for
Of
sure.
course.
I mean, every
Of course.
person is different and every relationship is different. But I think in general, people tend to leave therapy. Well, sometimes they leave too soon because they get scared. There's too much to face, or often people will come to therapy and talk about a very bad relationship, but they're scared to leave. And at some point, they leave therapy instead of the relationship, and that happens. But they might come back later. But I think in general, you kind of know that it's time to leave therapy when, and it's not a head thing, it's you just kind of know. You don't have to talk yourself into this. It's when you feel like you're coping well enough. We all have stuff. Our stuff's not going to go away. There's going to be someone who makes us upset, or a job that doesn't work out, or a relationship doesn't work out, or our kids are in pain, or whatever it is. But when we feel like we have the resources to handle it without falling apart ourselves or without doing something that we don't feel good about, then it's okay to leave therapy. It's like, I always come up with that image of like a therapist helps you get on the bike, holds the back of the bike while you learn to ride and get balance. And when you have balance, you can ride away, and you're supposed to. We don't go to doctors forever. We go to the doctor to get a certain medication or to get a surgery or whatever, some kind of treatment. And then when we're better, we don't go back, So I think it's like that.
Man, I really like how you stated that. That was
No,
that was like a good way to think about it.
I never thought about that. I'm letting you know. I'm going to use that some way, somehow. I'm going to use it.
Oh no.
But do you have any other questions or anything, Tyler, Phyllis?
No, we're good.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. This was a good talk.
This is great. So,
Great.
Phyllis, do you have anything you like to share with this is your time to shine.
Well, I would love to just say to your audience that I wrote a book called American Therapy, and it's bringing all of these principles of healing ourselves to healing our country, because I feel very passionate about and worried for our country with the level of violence and divisiveness and hatred and escalation of mass killings and discrimination and injustice and poverty. These are things that we, in the world of psychology, we do know how to address some of this. We do know what helps a family become healthy for all of its members. We're never going to do it perfectly, but we could do a whole lot more for each other in this country than we're doing now. And so I would love to see those principles, brought to national attention as well as into our own individual lives, because also the more we heal ourselves, the more we're likely to be healthy contributing members to our larger society and not be the people who are bullies or extortionists or, acting out with violence and hatred. So it's that combination between the macrocosm and the microcosm. But I guess the one thing that I just always like to say kind of in ending is that, a lot of people today feel helpless. They feel like there's nothing they can do. It's just the terrible things that are happening in the country are too big, even though there's wonderful people doing amazing things all over the country and all over the world. There are people who are big sisters and big brothers and who are, cleaning up the water and, volunteering in schools and volunteering with prisoners. And, there's an enormous amount of generosity going on in our country, of philanthropy and donating time and resources. It doesn't always make the news, but I did some research when I was writing my book, and there's quite a bit of generosity in our country that goes unnoticed. But for anyone who feels helpless about turning the tide here, I would just say, do what you can in the circle of people that you live in. You were talking about this before. give somebody a hug, ask them how they're feeling. Go out of your way to do some little kindness. Acknowledge people for the good things they do. There's so many people in the workplace today, for instance, who never hear thanks for the good job that they do. It's just kind of expected and they feel taken for granted. And just having someone say, wow, you did a great job there. Or, when you come in and smile at everybody in the morning, it just lights up the room. It doesn't even have to be anything big. That we just acknowledge each other, and it's just like the best food that we could feed each other, and it's free.
Yeah.
I'm with you with the thank you. Just a small little tangent of mine. When I was working a second job, I would say thank you for everything. For if anyone helped me in anything, and a coworker asked me, he was like, "Why do you keep saying thank you?" I'm like, it's their job, but we all know people who don't actually do their job when they're doing their job.
Right.
So I say thank you. You get tired of me saying thank you. I guarantee you that, because I think it goes a long way.
That's so funny. I was thinking of a job thing that happened to me too. Because I was one time when I was at work, my last job, the girl who worked at our front desk, she always helps to bring in lunch when we had like people come in during lunch and things of that nature, like guest speakers and things like that. And one time they had some lunch left over, and I was like, "Did you eat?" And she was like, "Oh, thanks." Like, it would bring her whole day. Like, she told somebody about it to the point that I was like, "Are you okay? Like, do you be eating lunch?" And she was like, "No, it was just the nicest thing anybody's asked me." And it's
Beautiful.
like, you just never know.
Right. You never know. Beautiful.
But
all right, Julian, it's time.
It's my time to do the thing.
The thing.
The thing. All right. So I'm doing something slightly different. I'm bringing two quotes for my thing. They're both from Drew Bryant. The first quote. This one's for all the parents. It's hold on. I'm just gonna read this off the screen. Don't mind me. But it is: quit yelling at your kids before they go to bed and expect them to sleep well at night. Quit yelling at your kids in the morning right before they go to school and expect them to have a good day. And then the second quote, it's for everyone, and it's again Des Bryant is who said this. You set the tone for yourself. You set the tone for your voice that they will always remember in their heads. You become their inner voice. Don't become their inner critic.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes. And then my last little bit is, if you like what you heard, actually, I don't even know where I'm going. But if you made it this far, thank you so much for making this far. If you know someone who would benefit from this, or you think they would enjoy, share with them, or at the very least, leave a review, comment. It would mean a lot for us. And then if you would like to support the show at all, you can at Patreon at Patreon, Not Enough Questions. The description will be below. And then people who watch this on YouTube, there's a website there too where you can see all the episodes and hear more. But yeah.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you.
Wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
And I guess my closing statement is, don't forget to ask yourself, ask others, never stop asking questions. See you.
See you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.